and be wonderful and good. And we have to, as the teaching community, as the parent community, have to shout from the rooftops the great things that we get to do and get to see. So thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Mrs. Gross. Board response to open forum. Seeing no hands, quite interesting. Okay. I was with Miss Urban on today. They had orientation of the student school board. And I am very excited about that process. Number one is it didn't come from the top down. It came from the bottom up, which is always more authentic and more genuine. And I told that group on today in orientation that what I'm most excited about is the day that they make a proposal of a policy, either change or addition, that actually makes it all the way from the bottom, all the way to the board, policy committee, and that we actually vote on a policy that came from that student school board. I think that's an exciting process. The teachers that were there, it's really going to teach them about governance and about how the process works, because it's really about them. So they should have a voice in what goes on. To Mrs. Gross, we probably won't have a resolution tonight, but that will be the discussion on when we're going to come out with whatever we come out with. So, all right, Ms. Clapton.
I had to have a little processing minute before I raised my hand. One, I just wanted to applaud. I love when students come and speak, and it takes a lot. It's hard to speak in front of people for adults, so I appreciate when our students come. So thank you for coming and sharing. I actually have a colleague who's very involved in the civics piece, so I've learned a lot about it. It's a pretty exciting thing. And Ms. Gross, I just want to be 100% transparent that part of the reason the resolution isn't done is because that fell on me, and I was supposed to help write the draft, and I will be honest, things on the list got buried. So that is not the full board's shoe, that was sort of my task list, and I didn't do super well on my task list. But I will say I appreciate, and we will talk more in our legislative update, but I agree with you that it's concerning that locally that there is a lot of push for this, and I think that there are a lot of very legitimate concerns, and I think what's really important to understand in the board with that, you can absolutely support parental and family choice and also not support vouchers or education savings account. The two things do not have to be mutually exclusive, and I think that it's important for us to make that clear.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. Seeing none. We don't have any student reports on tonight. They took the night off. I think we decided to ask them what they wanted to do, and they chose to not be here tonight. All right, at this time, we'll have the acting superintendent's report.
Good evening, board.
Strasser.
Tonight, I know you're going to later on have the opportunity to vote on a recommended calendar. So I just wanted to share just a couple of quick thoughts regarding that, some of the information that I've shared over time with you all. Yeah. When we put calendars together, we want to be very student-centered and take the approach that any calendar put forward needs to be supportive of our students and how we can best have consistency in their learning over time. So that's obviously a huge part of it. We have to meet certain obligations that are contractual. So we work towards doing that. We want to include staff development and quality professional development throughout a calendar. And of course, we want to be responsive to our start and end times. And one of the changes we made for this calendar year was to move the end of semester one prior to the Christmas winter break. And in the recommended calendar, it's moving graduation up a week. So I just wanted you to hear some of my thinking around that as we consider that tonight. The kind of some staff things, staff appreciation. We haven't had one in January, but in a few short days on February 2nd, our staff is invited to go bowling, and that'll be over at Meadowwood. So really excited for that opportunity. Speaking of our staff, we created an in-district transfer request process this year, trying to give opportunity for our staff to request movement within our district and have a streamlined process for that. That's one of the things that we heard quite a bit last year. So we wanted to try and be responsive to that, and we rolled that out last week, and we'll continue that process. Goes about a month, and then we'll be looking at the requests and making determinations from there. So I thought that was an important step for us to get that piece out. I've been really working with some of our leaders on how we can increase our elementary options, and this is really about bringing some virtual opportunities to our elementary students. And I want to bring that forward to you to know that in the coming months, we'll have more information about that and what that will look like and how we can bring that into our district. So supports for our elementary students that way. I haven't said much about our school app, our school website updates. Just so you know, spring break, I want to say, is right around the corner. And that's when we intend to roll out the website. But recently we got our first look at the app, which was pretty exciting. Maybe more exciting for some of us in the office than others, but we haven't had one as a district. So just that opportunity and what that can do from a communication and information standpoint. So we're pretty excited to see how that piece was coming together. You all know the legislative, we kind of hashed over some of that already. And it is really important that we stay in tune with House Bill 1009, which has a hearing tomorrow. I think it's very important that we're aware, and I'm looking forward to the conversation, comments later. But House Bill 1009 creates and funds a private school voucher program. House Bill 1020 is very similar. So Mr. Sassy and I have had some conversations around these and other bills, and working with the lobbyists, and we'll hear more about how the lobbyists are working with us a little bit later. And the last thing I want to leave you with, January is Board Appreciation Month. So I want you all to know that we are proud to celebrate the hard work and dedication of all 7 of our board members, you all sitting here tonight. As individuals, you play a crucial role in shaping the future of Rapid City area schools by creating and maintaining systems that support the achievement of our district's goals. As board members, you volunteer your time and you work to ensure every student has access to the resources that they need. You all embody a spirit of advocates of excellence. You demonstrate a steadfast commitment to helping every student achieve their academic goals and reach their full potential. So I wanted to let you know that we appreciate each of you as board members and how you serve as advocates for excellence in public education. Thank you. That's my report, and I'll answer any questions you may have.
Do we get a trophy or a medal or a watch or anything coming with that appreciation?
How about thank you?
Yeah, we'll take it. Mrs. Urban.
Okay, so I have a question and a comment. First, on the virtual option for elementary, I think that's a really great thing to work toward, as I know that there are people that, for whatever reason, are more comfortable having their kids at home, but don't always have the curriculum or the structure. So I think that will definitely be helpful for them. And then I'm just wondering, are either one of you going to be testifying tomorrow?
We don't have any plans to testify tomorrow. I don't know if that'll be on the docket at some point for us to be involved that way. I think that's kind of an evolving opportunity, and I would definitely take that opportunity if presented.
Okay, Ms. Clapham.
Thank you for the report. I agree on the virtual options. I think that's great to almost revisit that because we did have it for a year, like prior to, but post-COVID. So I think that there is already some structure there, I'm sure, so it's not necessarily reinventing the wheel. I wonder on the calendar, is there a formal calendar committee? And if there is, who's on the calendar committee? I just wonder kind of where the input comes from when shifts and changes are made.
There's no formal committee, but I did pull together several leaders, principals, district leaders in our building. I communicated with RCEA regarding the changes as well. So I feel like we touched a lot of different voices in making the recommendations that we did.
Thank you.
Now, Chief Financial Officer report, Mr. Sassy.
Thank you very much, President Carr. I am going to change my view around here. Okay, board wanted to take a few minutes tonight and discuss sort of this last part of our series in which we had talked about some of the early budget indicators and things we can look at early on in that process and get a better understanding of how the fiscal year is going to play out. And so you recall, we talked through property valuations, enrollment, and really I think of state aid as sort of this third big leg of the stool, so to speak, when it comes to looking at our revenue picture and understanding how that's going to pan out. And I think these details get especially important as we start to talk through the legislative process and some of the impacts that are crossing over from legislation into these various areas of conversation. And so I wanted to make sure we had an opportunity to talk about this tonight. So let's talk about state aid. Ultimately has the greatest overall impact on the financial condition of the district. And that's an interesting point because as you'll see here shortly, it is not the single largest revenue source to the district, but because of the way that it interacts with other areas of the organization, it really has the highest impact on the district's financial condition. As we've discussed, it's heavily impacted by changes in enrollment, property valuation. I think it's generally the most misunderstood aspect of school finance, and we'll touch on some of those different aspects of why that is. And then lastly, what we have to keep in mind from this point forward until something changes is now there is the additional legal requirement to increase average teacher compensation as state aid increases. And that really changes how we look at that situation, as you'll see an example of here shortly. So I'm going to move through these next couple slides fairly quickly. You've seen a lot of this information. What is state aid? Of course, it provides basic support funding to districts through a legislatively approved formula. There are two different areas of aid: general state aid, of course, that which flows into the general fund of the district, and then state aid to special education. Those funds flow into those respective funds and ultimately are used to fund basic operations of the district. So they're not earmarked for any special or restricted purpose. They're used for basic operations. I always think it's important as we're having these conversations to point out what state aid does not do, because that is a very misunderstood area. So it does not only fund teacher salaries. It also does not fund an entire school system. And lastly, it is not earmarked only for specific expenditures. So again, as that money comes in, it's dumped into the general fund and special education pot and used for basic operation purposes. Significance of state aid. So I think it's important to point out how state aid interacts with our system and why it's so important. So in our current fiscal year budget, fiscal year 25, general fund budget is about $106.3 million. State aid revenue made up about $37.8 million of that, or about 35% of total general fund revenue. Now, if you recall from our previous conversations, we continue to see that tilt happening where property taxes taking over a larger percentage of overall revenue in the general fund, and state aid is continuing to take a smaller percentage. And so we see that continually playing out. When we think about general fund expenditures, again, 85% of those expenditures are salary and benefit related. So about $90 million of that budget is going directly to our employees. 93% of district employees are paid for through the general fund. Obviously, that touches every employee category essentially. And then those remaining expenditures are really the basic operational costs, supplies, materials, professional services, utility expenses, any type of basic business cost is flowing through the general fund. Again, as we just talked about, though it's not the single largest revenue source, the major impact lies in how it interacts with both enrollment and property valuation and acts as a governor. And I don't mean that in terms of like a political governor, but in terms of like an over-the-road truck that its miles per hour are limited. And you'll see exactly what I mean as we work through a couple of these scenarios. So it governs the overall amount of general fund revenue growth from year to year, which is why it has such a major impact on the district. As we've discussed, it's really a formula issue. The formula is very misunderstood and it comes down to being rooted in this formula issue. So again, formula changed post teacher compensation bill back in 2017. And it really has four major variables now. The enrollment, which is always going to be the single largest driver of what happens with that overall situation. The target teacher salary, which is the most misunderstood aspect of the formula, the overhead rate, and then lastly, the removal of local effort. So the movement of all these variables will dictate what happens to a district state aid revenue. So the number one misstatement or myth that we have to debunk immediately is that if state aid increases X, whatever X is, 2, 3, or 4%, that state aid revenue is increasing 2 or 3 or 4%. That is not an accurate statement. First of all, what's actually happening is the target teacher salary of the state aid formula is what is increasing. Movement in all those other variables is going to dictate what the final amount that's kicked out of that formula is. And you're going to see, as we work through this, an example of that. So I want to take a few minutes and talk about a fiscal year 26 projection. And I should asterisk this, that of course we're early in the budget process, things can change, there's a lot of movement happening, but if things stood the way they are today, this is a good indicator of what state aid would look like moving into next year. So similarly to the past several years, the district is going to see this pattern play out again, where we see an increase in local effort or property tax revenue and a decrease in enrollment. And so we have these very confusing factors that would usually follow a similar trend line, where if one's increasing, the other's increasing, now going opposite direction on our axes, which is very confusing for everyone. And this is really the specific mix of variables that the state aid formula hates. It does not treat the mix of those variables favorably. So again, enrollment, as we've discussed, fell from 12,420 ADM to 12,197 in the 2024 state aid fall enrollment count. So it was a decrease of about 1.8% from an enrollment perspective. On the flip side of that, property valuation saw property valuation drove a 1.59% increase in general fund tax revenue. So again, what we see is enrollment going downward and property tax going upward. And the formula doesn't like that. The other two variables in that formula, the target teacher salary and the overhead rate, are legislatively set. So we have no control over that. That's what's going to be the war for the next couple of months in Pierre. But ultimately, we don't directly control those variables. Yes, ma'am, please. Yes.
Sorry, Ms. Shirley. On that property valuation, is that fully determined by the county? Or do we as a district, I know we vote on like the certain rates, but is that mainly determined by the county, not us? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes, the district has nothing to do with the valuation set forth for any classification of property in our community. The board is setting the levy applied to those property, or excuse me, those value classifications, but the board or the district has nothing to do with the actual property valuation movement, all county related. Good question.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, please.
And just to further clarify
Yeah.
that, I totally lost my thoughts.
She asked about, that's all right.
See if it's the same one, see if we're sharing the brain cell. To further clarify that, the levy that we set, I've heard before, well, why don't we just set a lower level so we get more state aid?
Sure.
Is it correct that the state aid formula uses that max regardless?
Yes, correct.
So
Yes.
even if we took a break, that wouldn't make our cup bigger. It would just
Absolutely.
skim some off the top.
Accurate. It's essentially a backstop built into the formula so that we don't artificially increase the state's share of that burden. I think that's a very politically correct way to say that.
Yes, and along those same lines, there are maximums. We can't exceed.
Yes, yep, legislatively said as well, yeah, so you are still governed by what you can and can't do. Okay, so I'm gonna show you, and again, I should asterisk, this is early on, and this is unsettling, I think, at this point, but there's a lot of process to work out. So this is an example if we took all the factors as they stand right now, including the governor's recommendation of a 1.25% increase to the target teacher salary. This is what state aid will look like as we move into next year. So again, enrollment is our first major variable. We plug that in. We submitted a estimate, state aid fall enrollment estimate for next fall of $12,050. That was a 1.2% decrease from 2024. So we're building in a bit of a buffer. Of course, we hope that enrollment increases or stays stable, but we're acting conservatively and building in a buffer. So that is the number, regardless of what actually happens, that the district will be paid on for the first half of the year. Count happens in the fall of 2025. They plug in the accurate number. In December of next year, we will start being paid on the accurate count number. So either way, this is the number we're stuck with for now. We work through the first part of the formula. I won't high center on that. Ultimately, we come to the second major variable here, which is the target teacher salary. Again, most misunderstood. When you hear the message, state aid is increasing by X, that is not accurate. Whatever comes out of the legislative process as an increase to state aid is going to this number only. So the target teacher salary is the component that increases by whatever that legislatively set increase is. So in the current year, that target teacher salary is $62,045.62. If we applied the 1.25% increase that the governor recommended, it would increase that salary to $62,821.19. So that's where the increase is applied. It goes through more calculations. Again, I'm not going to high center on that. And ultimately goes through the third major variable, which is the overhead cost variable. This variable has not been increased as far as I could find for the last 7 years through the legislative process. And again, I'm not going to high center on explaining exactly what that is. It's, as you can see from the verbiage, the state aid share for non-teacher expenses. So the idea being everything else in your system should only cost X. And so this is the rate we're going to apply for that. Obviously, that is, we could talk about that for a very long time, but it is what it is and it's in the formula. So again, current year rate is 38.78%. We're applying a 0% increase. I've not heard a lot of scuttle that's going to be addressed in the legislative process. We'll see what happens. But at this point, leaving it flat as it has been over the past several years. Okay, then we drop down into the second portion of this formula. So this number becomes very, very important. This is the number, as we drive down through this formula, that comes out of that first half of the formula. And it's called the total general state aid need. So if you come away from this discussion with one thing, I hope it's this. That is when we talk about the cup analogy, okay? That is what dictates the size of the cup. So essentially, that figure, and in this particular scenario, 90.6 million, is the size of the cup for general fund resources. And I'll talk more about that here shortly. Then we come to the fourth major variable, which is we have to remove the local effort of the property taxes that the district are receiving. There's a couple different subcategories to that. As you can see, the first half of the current pay year, the second half of the previous pay year, and then this other revenue, local effort, other revenue. And that is also this sort of property adjacent revenue category that gets lumped into other revenue and also must be counted against that need. So ultimately, we add those three figures together. We subtract that from the total general state aid need to get what the district will ultimately receive in state aid under these circumstances, okay? As you can see, in the current fiscal year 25, we've budgeted $37.8 million. Again, under the applied conditions of this formula, we'd be looking at about $35.6 million in state aid, which is a year-over-year decrease of about 2.2 million. So again, when we hear the message, well, there's a lot of messages. One being state aid is increasing X. That's not accurate. The target teacher salary is increasing X. We could go really deep on this, but like we talked last year, when we hear the message, well, school districts are not passing on increases to teachers. This is a great example of why this is so misunderstood and how we got to where we are. Because again, 1.25% increase to target teacher, and because of this mix of variables, which is not anybody else's fault, however, it is what it is, we're going downward from a year-to-year perspective in state aid revenue considerably, $2.2 million. Just for your information, I think it's important to understand break even, so a point where we were essentially on the same level in terms of state aid revenue from year to year would require about a 3.75% target teacher salary increase or an overhead rate increase or some mix of those two. So as you can see, from a variables perspective, this number, enrollment, is really always going to be the primary driver of what's happening with that situation. Because even when you increase the target teacher salary, it's not enough to offset oftentimes the impact from a decrease in enrollment. And that's really, really important to think about as we talk through these legislative situations. So,
Oh, I did have a question.
yeah, please.
Can you go back to, so I took a picture of it so I could look at it. So 2.2, anticipate 2.2 million less in state aid
Yep.
from 35. So is that 7%? So a 1.75% increase in state aid, as they call it, in increased education, which is what everybody calls it.
Yep.
A state increased education of 1.75%,
2.5.
1.25%. We anticipate that would, in actuality, be approximately a 7% decrease in our state aid.
Accurate.
Okay,
Yes,
I just
ma'am.
want to make sure that
You
I
got
got
it.
the math right.
You got it. So again, back to our cup analogy, the cup is determined by that figure coming out of the formula right here. And it will never grow over that formula, no matter what happens with any other revenue source. You're gonna see this here in a moment. Property tax could grow 50%. And if that number doesn't increase, all that will happen is the tilt between state aid and property tax will continue to get steeper and steeper. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so our state aid is gonna would, in this model, go down 7%.
Yep.
What is the total general state aid
Gosh, great
need?
question. So
What happens to that with a 1.25% increase?
the need,
Yeah,
so the need is that figure. That's exactly.
right. What is our need for this year?
I don't know. More than 90.5 million.
So also our need would go down.
Yes. Yep. Because ultimately what again, I think what is very difficult to overcome in this mix of variables is a downward trend with enrollment and an upward trend with property valuation, because that's automatically going to drive additional revenue in terms of property tax. But because enrollment is such a huge impact in the formula, like I think of it as like it's heavier weighted in the formula, right? And so it just can't make up for that until you're getting up in the 3 and 4% range. It can't make up for that downward trend in enrollment. So the need number ultimately decreases in this particular situation from where we were last year, which is what drives that downward trend. Additionally, then you have property tax pressing upward. So it just makes for this volatile mix where you can't grow the size of that cup. And you'll see, so related to your question, if you don't mind, what I think ties it together, hopefully it'll help tie it together, is when you look at the overall projection for the general fund. So again, zoom out from state aid. State aid is one funding source. It's very important, but it's not the entire funding mechanism of general fund. So when we zoom out from that and we look at the total general fund, and you know, we've simplified this very much, obviously, broken it down to categorical. So from a local revenue perspective, again, that being primarily your property taxes, we're seeing about a 1.25% increase. So property tax revenue pushing upward. County sources always stay about the same. On the state side, we're seeing a decrease again of 2.2 million, which is made up almost primarily from the state aid increase, and that's with applying that 1.25% of about 2.2 million. On the federal side, projecting about a 2% increase in those revenues. They're kind of like clockwork. That's about what they usually increase. And then a really small decrease in other. So again, I think if we push ourselves away and we think about this from a stakeholder perspective, if I'm sitting in my house watching this discussion and I say, my property taxes have increased every single year for the last several years. How are you as a district saying you're not seeing more money in your general fund? You can't increase compensation. Well, this is why. So from a total general fund revenue year over year perspective, even with property taxes pushing up, at this point in time, we're projecting a downward trend in terms of overall revenue of about 1.3 million. So we would see a 1.25% decrease in general fund revenue year over year, with an increase to property tax, with an increase of 1.25% to the target teacher salary. So it's a very, very confusing mix of stuff going on that, again, I think from a stakeholder perspective and outside perspective, is very, very difficult to understand why these variables are pointing in opposite directions, and ultimately why we're seeing in this particular situation less revenue growth or very limited revenue growth from a year over year perspective. That's a lot.
Yeah, thank you. Can you go with the cup with me for once?
Yeah.
So to put it into the cup.
Yeah.
The cup has gotten smaller, even though it's been said to be 1.25% bigger.
Accurate.
Whatever.
Yes, sir. You're right.
The cup has gotten smaller.
Yep.
We're raising that level. So essentially that state aid is, in the metaphor, overflowing. It's going off the
Right.
edge. It doesn't fit in the cup anymore, so that's
Right.
kind of why that's going down.
Yep.
Okay, got that, following that. Other question on the previous slide, one before
Yep.
that. The other revenue.
Yep.
So I've heard things about like imposing other types of taxes, getting creative.
Yeah.
That all goes into that, right? Like there's, besides bond and opt out, there's not really any other tax we can collect, correct? Because it still goes into the formula?
Yes, essentially, yes. It is encapsulating a significant cross-section of revenue areas that most people would consider separate and apart from property taxes. For example, wind farm. We don't have any wind farm. New Underwood has a massive wind farm, and that is beating them up right now because they have to remove that from their local effort. Bank franchise. So the majority of our local effort, or excuse me, our other revenue under local effort is what is called the bank franchise tax. And that's a long-winded explanation, but, you know, essentially these banks are paying this franchise tax. And that's the majority because we have a lot of banks. Sioux Falls has a lot of banks. That's really the majority of our other revenue. But if we had wind farm or solar farm or, you know, a lot of these other categories or, you know,
For bed
an
tax
occupancy
and-
tax, yes,
yeah,
on a
things like
hotel,
that, yeah.
I'm certain that would end up under local, other revenue as well. So,
So it wouldn't do us any good,
Yeah.
essentially. It would just
Yeah.
push that
Yep.
local effort part up even higher.
right. And that's why in my warped brain, the governor, analogy makes so much sense to me because no matter what else happens, unless that formula changes, if you have that mix of variables, your revenue isn't going anywhere, your overall revenue. Unless something changes and that need figure increases. And that would take either stabilization of enrollment, an increase in enrollment, or a significant increase in target teacher salary or overhead, the overhead rate.
Cool, thank you.
Ms. Urban.
So it is fair for a property tax owner to say they're footing more of the bill.
100%.
They're just,
Absolutely.
and we're being kind of penalized for losing students.
Absolutely. I think that's a very fair statement.
I would go as far, I mean, the property tax owner is footing more of the bill and the state is footing less.
Mhm.
So all these years that it's like, oh, our budget is you know, the state budget, we're surprised that we're running at a surplus. Partly it's on the backs of local effort into school districts, in districts like Rapid City. I think
Yeah,
that's
that's a very fair
it's a
statement.
fair statement. I had another thing to say and then I pulled the Katie. Sorry. Just tonight. It's not that you do it all the time, but I did have something else to say.
Here's how we can make this even muddier, everyone. So on the flip side of that, let's talk about the target teacher compensation requirement. Okay, so again, law now requires that the average teacher compensation must increase by 0.97% of the increase to target teacher salary. So if we played that out under the 1.25% scenario, that would mean a mandatory 1.21% average compensation increase. So again, this is where these false narratives become particularly problematic when you're talking about a projection decrease of 2.2 million. And then if we flip over to the right here, our teacher base for fiscal year 25 is about 55.4 million. The general fund share of that is 81% or about 44.9 million. 1.21% increase for the average compensation costs about 543,000. We add 74,000 of payroll and retirement benefits on, so total increase cost about 617,000, right? So you contrast that with the idea that we're losing 2.2 million in state aid revenue. Our general fund sources are going down 1.25% as a whole. And on the flip side of that, we are legally required to increase compensation by at least that much. Now, as Ms. Gross, she ran away, aptly pointed out, no one in the world has experienced a 1.25% inflationary increase over the last year. So it's not that we don't want to pass that on, but I would invite anyone to explain to us how that makes sense and how we can do that in a way that is responsible for our general fund. So overall, just puts the general fund in a really difficult position. I think I have one more slide left, and I'll try to go through it quickly. So we get these really common arguments, and they kind of tie back to these false narratives. So first common argument is, well, increased property tax should make up for any loss you have in state aid, right? Well, because of the way the formula treats property tax, local effort removal, that's only true if all these other major variables are moving in a positive direction, particularly enrollment. Again, we're back to that governor effect. If the need figure in that formula isn't increasing, then it's very difficult to increase overall general fund resources. The other common argument is, well, if your enrollment fell, then you just reduce your costs. And that sounds great on paper, you know, and we've continued to reduce costs over the past 5 years. Every year that I've been here, we've continually reduced costs. We've reduced staff, not in a large scale RIF way, but certainly in an attrition way. We've reduced discretionary budgets. We've closed the building. So we've done a significant amount of budget reduction. However, again, that idea of as your enrollment falls, you should just reduce costs. That sounds great on paper, but it results in a diseconomy of scale. And if you want to make an appointment and come to my office and I'll bore you for an hour with diseconomy of scale. But suffice to say, it becomes very difficult to reduce expenses in a linear manner alongside enrollment decline. We don't have the ability to do that. We have a diseconomy of scale. So it often takes time to make the movements necessary to change what the budget looks like and result in that reduction that comes with reduced enrollment. I believe this is my last slide. Sorry. So other possible outcomes of what could happen through the next 2 months. I think this is for a really nerdy joke, like if you're a Marvel fan, Doctor Strange is looking at like infinite possibilities over the next couple months of what could happen. So we could see a more significant increase to the target teacher salary. Of course, that's what we're hoping for is we go back to all of our groups representing us, go back and say we need more. And we see a more significant increase to either the target teacher salary or the overhead rate or both. Of course, we always have to be mindful of the idea that our actual enrollment count could increase, which would be great, or decrease. And that has an impact either way from how we structure the budget. We're running, again, all sorts of scenarios where, given some of the property tax bills that are in play, the state aid formula could be dramatically revised or even scrapped completely based on some of these bills that impact property valuation. And so Corey and I have had multiple discussions about what does that look like and what are the mechanisms at play here and how does that work? And so that's a real scenario at this point. And then, of course, just endless amounts of other scenarios we could work through. So summary, that's a lot. I know there's a lot going on there. It's very confusing. But I do think it's really important to understand as we push into these legislative conversations, how it actually works and how you can see an increase at the legislative level that ultimately doesn't correlate out to an increase at our level in terms of general fund resources. I'll stop there.
Mr. Berkeley, is your hand still up?
Yes, please. I just wanted to emphasize one thing on your last.
Yeah,
slide
please.
About, the reducing staff.
Mhm.
That's one that I hear all the time is that
Yeah.
we're overstaffed. Our lobbyist last year even said it at the Capitol. And I think part of that is that it doesn't make news because the way we do it.
Right.
We haven't had a RIF, as you said, where we
Right.
brought everyone in and fired a whole bunch of people and got everything
Yeah.
down. But we have closed Canyon Lake. That's essentially a RIF
Yeah.
that positions were eliminated. Like we have one less principal.
Yeah.
Things like that. There's been positions that don't fill that just never got filled and then
Right.
are no longer positions. We just haven't made the news
Yeah.
with our reduction. So I just really wanted to emphasize that point of, as you said, we have reduced staff. It just hasn't been out there because we didn't call. It's
Right.
not the way that you hear about it in like a major corporation where they call
Great
everyone
point.
in and everyone gets a scary email and
Right.
and you have a big old meeting. We didn't have that.
Yeah.
We just, a position never filled and it never, ever filled.
Right.
It's gone now.
Yeah,
And so I just wanted to really emphasize that. Thank you.
that's a great point.
Mr. Strasser.
Thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Berkland. I do want to reiterate, we have had attrition in my time here, and we haven't filled positions, but we've been able to still make things work at our buildings with appropriate class sizes. And there are, we have a few areas that, we're tapped out from a class size standpoint, and I'd love to add some FTEs, but we have to be very diligent on that. So we've gone through significant attrition, and the Canyon Lake closure moved us in some of that more recently. And then we follow a methodology. So a lot of our methodology from federal programs. So what people may not understand is how we utilize federal funds to support many of our positions and FTEs. So that does play into you know, how we're able to support, whether it's a leadership position or an intervention position, that kind of thing.
Good points.
Mr. Brooklyn, I can't tell if your hand. Okay, Ms. Stephenson.
I thought there were people in front of me.
They got off.
We're like, we'll let Christine talk. Coy, I appreciate this every time I hear it. I have a better understanding now of state aid. I can't believe how many years it's taken me to really wrap my head around this formula. I just wish, I think if I've been like only immersed in school board and it's still taken me that long to really wrap my head around this, I really do feel for our legislators who I can imagine don't know, like last year could have said like, but we gave you 7%, you know, like, I mean, it just, because in every piece of media that comes out, it is just, there was a 7% increase to education. And there is no, our state aid didn't, we know that, went down,
Right.
you know, by whatever percent,
Right.
probably 7%.
Yeah.
When the formula went up by 7%. But like this just, we've had no extra money for inflation. And I feel like there needs to be some sort of safety net on the formula. I mean, we need to think about what we could propose to ameliorate this situation, short of scrapping the whole formula.
Yeah.
And you almost feel like there has to be a safety net, like even if enrollment falls, districts still need to account for inflation. Like I like that South Dakota has a formula where there's a lot of equity across the state, you know, per student. Our districts are kind of even, you know, I like that there's an even playing ground in South Dakota. There's not rich districts and poor districts.
Yeah.
But I wonder if there is a way to do a safety net or like to make some sort of, not hold harmless, but like, you can't get cut more than 2% just because of enrollment or more than 1%. Because we're all infected by inflation. Anyway, it's just, we can talk about it in finance, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
I think you make such an excellent point, Christine, and I think that's always the tricky nature of trying to find solutions to that is how do we propose a solution that is gonna gain traction with legislators, that doesn't hurt other districts, that doesn't put the state in a really difficult position where they're now opposing it. And I think there are some really simple things that could happen and not, you know, not to launch into it now, but things like enrollment averaging or a different enrollment based accounting system that would be more accurate to what's actually happening or offset some of those drops in enrollment that you can experience. My preference, because it's my brainchild, would be a hold harmless around if your district is growing X, your property valuation grew by more than X, we're only going to count up to X. So for example, if your property valuation of your district grew 5% or more, we will hold you harmless at 3% or 4% or 5% or whatever the case may be. Because then essentially what that would do is artificially press down the property tax valuation growth and grow that cup. And the state's going to take on more of that, but I think in those situations, you're just going to see very few districts with that specific mix of variables, and so it would be a minor amount. But yeah, I think things obviously to talk about, and to me, that's where the solution lies, is legislatively in the formula.
All right, anyone else?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
I
Mr.
apologize. I know that was a longer conversation, but I think it was important for where we're at.
Okay, we have no conflict of interest at this time. On to the first reading of Rapid City Area Schools Policy and Procedures. I'm gonna do it this way. I will entertain a motion to approve the first reading of the Rapid City Area Schools Policies and Procedures.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded in discussion. I do want to say that the parent guardian conduct, it's a new policy. And I just wanted to make clear to the community that this policy was instituted for the protection of school staff, school administrations. And we know that sometimes parents come in and they're frustrated and they're angry about whatever situation they've had to come to the school about. But I think it's important, and one of the things that I've talked about in the board meetings is that we have mutual respect for everyone. And this policy came out of a need that too often secretaries and school staffs were quite frankly being disrespected and being berated by, again, parents, and all kind of things happen, and it could not even be the secretary's fault, and you're just having a day. But this policy speaks to that fact that we should all woosah, take a breath, whatever you need to do when you're upset, and be respectful to the school staff, the secretaries, the principals, and teachers, and everybody at the school. So I just wanted to kind of just speak on that, speak to why we have added this policy in the first reading. So, all right, any other discussion on these policies? Okay, all in favor of accepting the Rapid City Area School Policy and Procedures signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, it's just a
Aye.
first reading, so I didn't know if we said something different, but aye.
Oh. No, okay, now you're confusing me. Okay, I can proceed. Okay, any opposed, please say no. All right, motion carries for the first reading of our policies and procedures. Approval of proposed agreements. Any board member need to pull one of these agreements? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the proposed agreements.
Motion.
Any discussion? All in favor of approving the approval of the proposed agreements signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. Okay, motion carries. Any consent agenda item any board member would like to pull?
Yes, I would like to pull Alpha and Bravo.
Okay, Alpha and Bravo.
I'd like to pull K,
All right, that's Kilo.
Kilo.
Anybody else? So we have Alpha, Bravo, Kilo that are being pulled at this time. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda except for items Alpha, Bravo, and Kilo.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor of approving the proposed consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. Okay, motion carries. I need a motion for consent agenda item Alpha. Stand by. Because they need to be taken together, can we put them together? Right, we can't put them together, but is it your intention to put them together? Okay, so we will, I'll entertain a motion to approve items Alpha and Bravo.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, has it been improved and second to approve, moved and seconded to approve Alpha and Bravo? Discussion.
Yes, so I had some confusion on what this looked like from what my initial understanding was, and I'm wondering if any other board members have any appetite to process it a little more, understand the process a little more before we actually approve it. I've gotten some feedback from both community and staff that have some concerns, and not to say that we're ever going to make everybody happy, because we are not. The calendar never makes everybody happy. But I think it would be prudent to press. I don't feel like it's necessarily a life or death if it doesn't happen at this meeting, that it's a big deal if it waits 2 weeks. That's just my feeling. So I would like to pull it and discuss to bring it back later.
Okay,
Or I guess, because you don't want to say table it, right? We went over this. We don't want to table it.
No, you'll need to make a motion. If there's any further discussion, make a motion to, remove items from the consent agenda, A and B, and not suspend, but postpone them for another vote, or hold them.
To a later
further
vote.
discussion.
Yes.
Okay, so we're still in the discussion of the original motion of approving Alpha and Bravo.
I think Mr. Rubin.
I did want to ask Dr. Strasser, how confident are you in light of hearing that there, and this is always difficult when you hear rumblings, is it just one or two people that would rumble anyway, no matter what it was, or do you feel confident that you've gotten enough consensus to go ahead with this schedule?
I can tell you internally, there's been very little conversation around this or disagreement with this. So from an internal standpoint, I would feel pretty confident. As Ms. Clapham pointed out, people are always going to grumble about the calendar. And I'll point out, you do have an approved calendar for 25-26. These are recommendations based on things I had heard from staff and that we worked on specifically around moving graduation up a week and what's advantageous there from a student standpoint is around activities. We have more activities on Memorial Weekend that challenge our kids to get back to graduation on Sunday and to have a weekend of graduation, than being a week earlier. So that was a major part. And so of course, we're talking about high school kids here. So that was there. And then just trying to look at, you can argue one way or another, like Thanksgiving. So we moved two days off of Thanksgiving. So instead of a full week, now you have a 5-day. And I hear both ways. I hear from people that's a long break. And I hear other people say, we need a long break. So I don't think it matters. We maintained the spring break timeframe. So that is a significant break during the spring of the year, which is appropriate in my opinion. We shuffled around some of the professional development times so that in October, you had a 4-day weekend for students. Staff have a professional development day, followed by Indigenous Peoples Day on the 13th. And then in February, so instead of having today as a PD day, after Martin Luther King Jr. Day, we moved it to after President's Day, which we felt balanced the schedule, the calendar better because we're 2 weeks off of a new semester and a break. So to have another 4-day break for students, I felt like it's hard to get into routines and it's hard to develop that consistency. So is it better around President's Day? There's an argument around that, but our family's going to be gone for President's Weekend, and is that more of a travel time than now? So I felt that was more appropriate for our staff to have a professional development day in February, and that was confirmed by our team and the people that I worked with on this. So we made some intentional moves to try and balance when we have breaks. Every 4 to 6 weeks, do we have an intentional break for our students and our staff where we have continuity, but also I need a break from, not from learning, but just from the intensity of learning. So that's how we tried to construct this. We were able in this calendar to balance the semesters at 83 and 85. I can tell you that's a lot harder in 26, 27 to find that balance. So we're really struggling as I put together the early parts of that calendar. So overall, when you think through this, again, you have a calendar. There's no problems with the calendar that's approved. There were just some things that were brought to my attention, and I thought we would bring that before you to consider, and that's where we are.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Urban?
Okay, so thank you. I know there's a lot of thought and work that goes into this, and personally, I like the calendar and the changes that you made. I like this, how it's spread out. But I think that it is a pretty big departure from the norm. And I know in the past, we've done calendar surveys where we would put like 3 calendars out and let the community weigh in on what they like the most. I do think this is really student-centered. I like that. And I guess I struggle with a little bit, how much should we consider community, parents, all of that in the calendar? We always hear about tourism. I'm surprised we didn't hear anything this year. That's pretty early, and I sometimes worry about, because we have so many buildings without air conditioning, that starting as early as we are could impact them. But again, people really like finishing before Christmas too, and that's really hard to do if you're starting later. So I get the complexities of all of this. I just wonder if we shouldn't get more community feedback, since this is a pretty big difference than what our families are used to. And then I wanted to ask, I'm assuming you did, but is the Civic Center available for graduation on that weekend?
Yes, we
Okay.
verified that.
Thank you.
Mr. Swan?
Thank you, President Carr. I hated making calendars, so I thank you, Dr. Strasser, for all your work. Appreciate all, getting some input and making sure that we're doing this right. In, past superintendent, the practice was to make it 2-year. I guess that was what she had mentioned to me, was a 2-year cycle of calendars. Is that practice gonna be continued?
I agree with that practice, and I would like to get there, which is why I also want to bring a 26-27 recommended calendar for you to approve or not, and then hopefully within the month of February.
Okay. The other question I have is regarding one of our community partners, and it was Owaye Luta Okola Kichie. I know they had been sitting in the waitings to be part of the I guess professional development calendar as well. And I don't know, I would prefer for them not to get lost. I know they are participating with our high school principal over at Central, Terry. And I know that they would really like to help out in the district. They do have some decent offerings. So I'm just making sure that they're not forgotten. Thank you, President Carr.
Any response to that, or?
I can work with our staff development manager to make sure that there's a connection with Mr. Lundin at Central in reference to this professional development.
Okay, Ms. Clapham?
Just, stir the pot and muddy the waters more is what I feel like. And I do want to make really clear, like I said, it's very complex, and I don't think no answer is a perfect answer, and definitely like what is best is for students is what is best. And so this is a kind of out there. So what I think it was not last year, but the year before, because of how long we went to school, graduation was actually prior to the last day of school. And so what I heard in translation through the air, when this was mentioned, that's what I was perceiving, was that the graduation date would be earlier, not necessarily school. Are there other districts, or have you experienced districts that have like the high school calendar and the K-8 calendar is not exactly like, we have the difference obviously in conference days, and maybe that's a terrible idea. But just wondering if that's like a typical practice, or if that is just a terrible idea.
I haven't seen it, but I haven't in this region, but I haven't researched that specifically either. I could tell you in my previous districts, of course, I was in another state. We were mandated to start school after Labor Day, and we finished with graduation on Memorial, and we always had 2 or 3 student contact days after that. So is it a practice that's been done? Yes. I would have to do some digging in this region to see if it's an accepted practice around here and within, more within South Dakota, but I'm not aware of a district that has kids after graduation.
Okay, Ms. Stephenson.
You know, I have two things to say. If you're doing the 26, 27, if we're moving the last day of school back to mid-May, then I really feel strongly that we need to, that spring break shouldn't be tied to Easter break, or that spring break should be shorter. I mean, I can't imagine if we had spring break this year, like on the 18th of April, and then on the 15th of May is the last day of school. That seems like a bad time to have a week off. So that's just a side note about this earlier day. I'm willing if you guys want to defer this for 2 weeks. Dr. Strasser, are there any big ramifications of delaying this vote for 2 weeks?
There aren't. You have an
Just
approved calendar.
Less time for planning.
So it does, the one thing, that we're looking at would be probably connected to our hiring, because we roll over our hiring calendar so that we can post positions appropriately within our position control system. So that would be the thing that I'd have to look at how we could finagle that until a decision on the recommendations are made. But we can also proceed with the current calendar. I don't think that's, well, once you start rolling over stuff,
Yeah.
that's a whole nother ball of wax. But I would figure that out, or we'd hold off. So, and to your point, I can just tell you, in looking at 26, 27, the Easter timeframe is super early in March, and that again creates a distinct challenge in that putting that calendar together and balancing breaks and semesters. But I'll bring that forward and you can chew on it at that time.
Okay.
Well, I wanted to finish my comment because if it's no big deal to wait 2 weeks, I just want to say I'm okay with waiting 2 weeks, but this is one issue I want the board and people listening to know. I will defer to you. I don't want to be, I have my opinions about the school calendar as a person who talks to people in the district and as a parent, but every time I hear about a calendar issue, there's a person who's for it and who's against it. And I don't have the capacity to get like a very scientific impression of what people want. I don't think anybody really does. And so if you hear from a lot of people in 2 weeks and you want to make changes, I would support that. But I don't anticipate I'll be saying make big changes because this is not my job as a board member.
Okay, I'm going to invoke, I'll take Mrs. Urban's last point, but I'm going to invoke my privilege as a president to end the discussion, and I'll give the board their options at this point, so.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I just wanted to respond to Jamie. I know Douglas does do that. Their seniors are done before their students. So they graduate that week early and it works fine. So that is a district we could look at. The other concern I had is, years ago, we had a calendar committee and we had a number of people from the tourism community that wanted to weigh in. And Sioux Falls did something, they 1 year had their start date, just kept moving earlier and earlier. And their community referred it to where now they do have to, I don't know if it's still this way, but they're required to start after Labor Day. And so I'm a little bit worried that if we kind of keep creeping into that, that might come. But I didn't hear a lot of complaints last year, so I could be wrong.
Okay, so here's where we are, and we can do a couple of things. We're ending the discussion on whether to approve items A and B of the calendar. If you take a up and down vote and the board votes it down, that we don't approve it, that just naturally means that it's not approved and it would have to be brought back later for discussion. Or any board member can make a motion, and which word we use, I think it can be tricky when you talk about Robert's rules of order, but defer, postpone, whatever word you want to use. You can make that motion and we can vote that motion up or down, which will then affect the original motion. Yes.
So I guess my only question would be if we're gonna vote it down or defer it, what are we asking him to do in the interim? Like, is there a specific request to go get feedback from this group, or what does that look like? Otherwise,
Well, if you vote it down, you can vote it down and then give him instructions on how he can bring it back, which would be, he would just bring it back, obviously, with the input, back on the agenda. Or if you make a motion to postpone, then in that motion, you give him directions. We'll postpone this, the vote on this motion so that you can do whatever we do. So it's kind of semantics, just. I'm not gonna vote it down. I just think the more voices you get in, it's never gonna be where everybody agrees on it. So I'm going to take the suggestion of Dr. Strasser, so that's where I'm gonna go. All right, so any board member gonna make another different motion?
So I would like to motion to postpone or defer with some further input from stakeholders would be my motion.
Okay, so we have a motion now to defer and refer items A and B for further discussion, and Dr. Strasser will get instructions from the board on what exactly you want. Okay, is everybody clear where we're?
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you for noticing that. Okay, so it's been first and seconded to make an amendment to, or make another amendment to postpone, suspend, and let's make that, to
February 4th.
February 4th, so that we have a set deadline, so
Yes.
you can bring it back if the board approves this motion. Okay, let's do a roll call vote. And again, for clarity, this vote is to, we're not killing the motion, but we're suspending, referring the motion to be brought back on the first meeting. Okay, Shirley?
President Carr,
No.
could you explain what a yes vote means? The yes means that we're deferring and the no
Yes.
means that we're not deferring?
Correct,
So you're voting on the second motion first?
correct.
Okay.
Roll call.
Troy Carr,
No.
Jamie Clapham,
Yes.
Christine Stephenson,
Yes.
Donna Moore,
Yes.
Michael Berkland,
Yes.
Walt Swan,
No.
Katie Urban.
Yes.
5 yes, 2 no.
Okay, so that automatically kills the original motion to approve or not approve. It's been voted that we will send it back to Dr. Strasser's office and to revise.
Not necessarily revise, provide time for input.
Whatever they want you to do,
So
you will be communicated with on what to do, because that what you just said didn't make sense to me, because if you're not, okay. Okay, so we've already voted. We're voted to defer it. And so for 2 weeks, and you can bring these items back to the consent agenda on February 4th.
Specifically, what do you request of him, though?
that's what I would like
Right, so
clarity on.
for me, and I'm speaking as one person, but I think what Q said, I don't think like completely muddying the waters, but I feel like if there was some sort of, even if it's for a 5-day window or whatever, the two calendars, the one we currently exists and this proposed one, and then, I mean, it's simple, A or B, and we may get a 50-50 and it won't matter at all and we'll be exactly where we were, or we may get a 70-30 that says, oh, no, this one really is, you know, more popularly said. I don't want it to be complex or any sort of, or coming up with a like third, fourth, fifth option. Like, I think it's option A, option B.
Okay, well, I don't understand that because if more people want option A, then you're saying the board is gonna vote for option A.
No, but we would have, right now, we don't know the stakeholder, like, for some people, and some people it won't, obviously, for some people, that stakeholder input does weigh on their choice, for some people it doesn't. But if you don't have the information, you can't really weigh that in the decision.
Okay,
But how are you gonna get stakeholder input on those calendars?
in 2 weeks.
You could do a survey. I
We
don't
cannot
even-
do a survey right now. We are surveying our people so much. Bobby can speak to that, in fact.
Can I say something?
Hold on, are you gonna have input, Bobby?
Yes, I just would
About
like,
the survey.
yes, the survey process. Right now, we are moving into strategic plan surveys. So we'll have employee experience survey going out on Monday and a parent experience survey going out on February 13th. We also have the superintendent search survey. So it is what I like to refer to as death by survey currently in our school district. If we want quality responses, we do need to limit the amount of surveys we're sending and then also the rounding process to make sure there's follow through on those surveys. And that the stakeholders that are taking it know that their answers are being accounted for and we're utilizing them well. So that's the only input I have.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Swan, then Ms. Stephenson.
Thank you, President Carr. I think if you're strategic about it, I think you could probably get in, the big N-words coming up, negotiations. So if we get our leaders with paraprofessionals, the support staff and the teachers unions, to kind of weigh in with that. And then we do have a parent council. We could probably get input from them if you were able to draw within those. But again, it's a lot of work within 2 weeks. So I'm just suggesting, I'm not really sure how this would go because you're right, it is death by survey. We do have a lot of surveys coming out. So however we do this, that was kind of the reasoning behind that. What I was voting for is that we've hired, we're working with professionals here. I think that, either way we go, I don't see it changing too much. So thank you.
Ms. Stephenson.
I just want to be really clear. I wasn't voting to defer it for 2 weeks to initiate a big information gathering. I thought that we just wanted a little bit of space for the community to know what was happening and to provide feedback to us or to Dr. Strasser if they need to. But I completely agree that there's too much going on in the district right now for this to become the more of an issue we make of it. It doesn't have to be the biggest issue. I just thought, let's buy ourselves 2 weeks so that if people do feel strongly about it, they've got a little bit of time to let us know. And if we overwhelmingly hear something, then Dr. Strasser has the chance to modify it. But I would not be upset at all if you bring back this exact same calendar based on what you hear or what we hear. That was my understanding. I don't want to create more work.
Because the motion did include that we would vote on February 4th.
Right.
On a calendar.
And
So
and the motion didn't include any instructions about, we didn't move to say that the administration will undergo a feedback seeking process for 2 weeks. We didn't move that.
But see, that was the spirit of postponing it so that could happen.
I thought we were just buying time, or I would have changed my vote.
No,
I think was it in the motion to get feedback? I thought you actually said that, to get feedback.
that was the spirit of referring it to get feedback. So whether it's actually in the motion itself, it was the spirit of the motion to give time for those who felt that other people needed to comment on it. So in the next 2 weeks, I
So-
guess however you get comments,
Couldn't that be as simple as an email from Dr. Strasser to staff and families just saying, so you're aware, here are some updated changes. They're gonna be voted on February 4th and that's it.
well, I think that needs to come from the board members that wanted I didn't want the referral, so that will have to come from those who wanted it and know what they want.
I'm happy to do that myself, just go out and seek input, because I don't know. I mean, I don't know where people stand on it. I'm okay with it, but I'm a little bit worried that if we were to pass something tonight, that people would feel like, whoa, this is a big change. Why didn't I know about it? So yes, more time for people to maybe weigh in and get the word out. I'm happy to just, start talking to people, and maybe you don't even need to do anything.
Well, number one, that's not necessarily our role, because it came from administration. So you're sending it back to administration and asking them, and that's the clarity that we need right now. What are you asking them to do to bring back the motion to us? That's the process and procedure.
Well, I think generally gathering feedback, but I was told that there's too many surveys, so that's not how you can do it. I'm trying to think of any other sort of practical way to do it. Certainly parent council is an option, but.
Okay, I have Mr. Berkland, Ms. Clapham, and Mrs. Moore, those three in that order, and I'm not back, just.
So for me, I was kind of similar to Christine. In seeking feedback, I was not imagining a formal process of seeking feedback. More of just like someone hears that we discussed this, they have 2 weeks to shoot me an email, shoot you an email, and provide that input. That's kind of what I was imagining in my vote of yes. So similarly, I'm totally, if it was, I might not hear anything. Then that's fine. I take that as an implication that yes, we go with the one that you already have. But if Matt goes out and writes an article tomorrow and I get a million emails, then maybe we need to have another discussion. But that's kind of where I was at. I personally don't have any directive for you at this time. It was more just time for people to email me mostly, actually, not even you.
I would say to keep it in the simplest of terms, one, it's like information's coming past the whole like surveyed out thing, like that information would have helped like 20 minutes before the conversation, which it is what it is and it developed how it developed. But I do agree just having 2 weeks to process, and even if it is just an email like, hey, here's the updated plan for 25. I think it's just an awareness thing, because previously, and everything doesn't have to be done how it's always been done, but previously, and I think that's what's coming, usually it was an information item the first time and then on the consent agenda the second time with calendars. And so like it basically, I guess I would be saying, can we just have that same process that this is more of an information item and then the next time it's voted on and then it's out, people are aware, we don't have to do something formal, but it's just out there.
And I understand that, Ms. Clapham. I think the difference is that we already have an approved calendar. So not that we can't do that better next time, if that does come up.
The only concern that I heard, and this was from staff, was not that they didn't like the new calendar, but that they were getting notified about it now, where they already had vacation plans already scheduled, and then that got changed. And so it affects their schedule that they had planned for vacation or whatever. And I don't know how many other people would have that same concern. I only heard that from one staff.
Okay, any other, Dr. Strasser, or in my absence, was there any clarity in what is expected to be brought back?
So at this point, I'll bring back the calendar And we'll have an opportunity to hear feedback from staff. I'll share it out a little bit more with our staff, and you'll have an opportunity to hear from whoever wants to comment your way, so that you can vote accordingly at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that. On to item K, course guidebooks. I will entertain a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
Yes, very briefly. I was the one who pulled this. Several reasons. I saw the opportunity to share from some of our student listening sessions. That one of the things we heard from students when we spoke to them was this class in particular is upset that next year the graduating class in 2026 is gonna have to take 5 credits in the fall. And mostly they're upset because they felt like this was just sprung on them.
Five.
And it was really important to them because they're kind and generous students. They wanted to make sure that the students behind them knew that that was coming so that they could plan differently. I read through the guidebooks, but I didn't see anything like, please note, you are required to take 5 classes, your fall semester of your senior year. I could have missed it. I'm gonna vote for this. I think it's a fine guidebook, but I just wanted to make a note that they would like to know that it should be really clear to students that they're gonna have to take 5 credit hours their fall semester of their senior year. And I wanted to share that. I wanted to note also on the listening session, some of the kids said that the pathways are very college focused. And I know that that was not the intention and is not the intention of pathways to be college focused. It's college and career. But I just wanted to point out that there is a definition of college that I thought was very broad. And I hope that that is, that students are getting that impression. I hope the board knows that when this district says college and career readiness, they're talking about technical schools, they're talking about military associate degrees. There's a lot of college, it's a broad definition of college, and I really appreciate that because I want our students to feel, I want them to know all the options and not to feel like a 4-year degree is the only option. And then I just wanted to appreciate the seal of biliteracy being included in that. I think that was responsive to what we heard from students. I think it's a great thing for our district, so I appreciate that. And that's all.
Okay, Dr. Strasser.
Thank you for those comments, Ms. Stephenson. I think a good practice for us in changes that impact kids in specifically in reference to the 5 credits in the fall. Normally we would roll that out with freshmen and walk them through those 4 years. So that wasn't done with this process, but that is typically how we would want to move significant changes. And whether 4 to 5 credits is significant or not, it's significant to these kids. So I appreciate the comments on that. And I definitely agree that the pathways are, it's unfortunate to hear that the emphasis is to college. It's great feedback, but we do want, I think everybody wants that well-rounded opportunity or just various opportunities for kids, regardless of their passions and future desires, so that we can work them through whatever, pathway is beneficial for their learning and education. So.
All right, any other discussion? All right, all in favor of accepting course guidebooks, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, please say no. All right, that motion carries. On to item 15, committee reports. Ms. Urban.
I've got a few. So the OCR committee report, the last meeting was held on January 8th. We met the new director of school climate. I cannot remember her full title. Thank you. Yes, Ms. Kit Veit. She'll be overseeing a lot of the work related to the OCR agreement. We went through updates and noted parts of the agreement that have been completed, including contracting with expert consultants, the compilations of the tentative stakeholder committee member list. Actually, it's not tentative. They did finalize that list. So there is a stakeholder committee.
How many people?
I don't know right off the top of my head. I'd have to ask Kelsey. I want to say like 21 or 22.
Okay.
And they do have a meeting scheduled for the end of February. I believe it's February 26th. More to come on that. They've gotten a lot of work done. There's a lot more to do. Now that we have Director Veit in place, I think we're going to see even more movement. But yes, lots of updates in terms of, working towards the requirements of the agreement. The Black Hills Military Advisory Coalition, Child and Family Behavior Counselors, they're called MFLACs. They are having a number of events to support families. There's going to be a big deployment with a number of airmen heading to North Dakota. And so they are having a Resilient Raiders event at the Freedom Chapel on Ellsworth Air Force Base on the second and fourth Thursday each month from 5:30 to 7. They're providing support groups for family members, education around work life and job duties. So if we have any students that are impacted by that deployment, that's a nice opportunity. They're working on an outline, a kind of a heat map of military families and where they're at in our community. A lot of times we just think they're on the east side or here or there, but they're actually really spread out. So as soon as I get that, I will share it with everyone. I think it will be helpful and potentially inform some of our bond conversations. Elevate Rapid City is supporting legislation around timely implementation of IEPs for military students transferring due to PCS. It sounds like our district has worked with, I think Dr. Strasser, you worked with some of those folks and to develop or at least support the legislation. Okay, and then Month of the Military Child is April 11th, so hopefully we can recognize our military connected kids during that month and particularly on that day. Finance Committee and anyone else on these committees, feel free to supplement this, but our CFO, Mr. Sassy, went through the capital outlay budget in detail. We discussed the importance of being intentional about directing those dollars each year, committing to allocating specific percentages to various areas, which will help us better focus on our higher priorities as well as assist in planning for upcoming projects. That's kind of the big update there.
To add to that, board, and I will practice my policy information by initiating a policy or discussing a policy and coming up with a policy that the board will strategically budget the not general capital outlay account. Right now, it's just being used and it's just being used when it needs to be used. And there's no strategic plan or budgeting for that process. So I'm going to work with the policy committee and try to draft a policy that will deal with us being intentional about capital outlay.
Perfect. Facilities, at our last meeting, we received an update from Co-op on their work when it comes to the master plan. They're working hard to get community feedback. They got about 2,500 responses from the community on their survey, so it's a pretty successful. They are also holding facility master planning community sessions. The schedule for that is on our website and also on social media. The Canyon Lake demo is expected to be complete, including all the dirt work, by the end of this month. And I just want to mention kind of the continuing conversation that we've had in facilities is about the growth on the community's east side and just kind of how pressing that is and possible solutions that we're having around that issue. So we'll continue to update everyone as we know more. And finally, Black Hills, our outreach committee, we talked about listening sessions that we'd had, the student listening sessions, which were really great. I compiled all of my thoughts and put it in a Google Doc, and we're going to send that out to everyone else so you can add to that, and then potentially we can give that to our administrators so that they have that information. And I'm sure my colleagues have more to add to.
So kind of supplement community outreach, just, so we really want to develop, talking about processes and policies. We want to leave a legacy of when we are no longer on the community outreach, that there's a process of we debrief, we document, and then we share that information, because we don't want the information to just be lost and not go anywhere. And so that there is a living Google Doc where that lives for whomever is on the community outreach committee. So that is what we would like to implement. And then also in community outreach, we were at Stevens as well as our CAA, getting a lot of student feedback, which was really beneficial. And the students were very talkative and active. And then just a reminder to the community that on January 28th, in person at South Middle School, we will have the listening session regarding transportation at 5:30 at South. And then via Zoom at 7 PM. And if you go to the website, you can find the link to the Zoom. And so that'll be 7 PM on the 30th is the Zoom option for those two.
Did that school district ever, I was gonna say, get those outhouses, but they're not outhouses.
Oh, the annexes.
Those outbuildings, not, yeah, did they ever come? They did come and get those, okay, all right. I was just curious about that. All right, Ms. Clapham.
Yes, the other is just ASBSD, I guess would be my main other one. If anybody is not getting the land emails, like if you register for land, you should have gotten like an email that this is going to the House Education Week tomorrow. If you did not get that, that means somehow you're not on the land list, so let me know. And the other is just you can't have two members from a board, but there was a resignation from the board of directors just for personal and family reasons. So there is an opening for the Western region for a district size 700 to 1,400 students. So if anyone has a colleague on another board and would like to suggest or reach out to them, we'd like to fill that vacancy. Ideally, the next ASBSD director meeting will be in February in Pierre, that President's Day weekend. So if you know anyone or someone comes to your mind, we would love to fill that vacancy.
All right, thank you. Mr. Berkeley.
Thank you. These two actually both write reports, and I just pull out papers out of my bag that I have all my notes on. So here we go. So first off, the Rapid City Public School Foundation had a meeting. We approved the grants tonight, so you can look back at those. The other things I want to share though is they're participating in a podcast. And so look out for that coming soon. And the I Love My Public Schools kind of campaign will be ramping up a lot in February with a coloring contest and some other fun and exciting things. There will be shirts available. Many of us already have one, but if you're out in the community and want an I Love Public Schools or I Love My Public School shirt, those will be on the Rapid City Public School Foundation website to get those.
Is that the same design? It's not a new design?
That's a great question. I
Okay.
think it is different. I know it has like
Oh.
sponsors on the back.
Is it? I want one.
So if you want another one, yeah. Let's see, what else? The Above and Beyond program has a new spring sponsor. All Meadow Manufacturing was gracious enough to sponsor that. And then other great news from them is the Teacher of the Years are in every school has put an application in. So that is to be celebrated. Yeah. Doesn't happen super often, unfortunately, but every single school does. So great job there. And those will be going through, that committee will be going through those soon. Looks like interviews are on February 12th, and then the reception to announce it will be on February 19th at the Performing Arts Center. I do not have a time, so please do not ask me. Similarly, the Evening of Excellence, once again, is on Thursday, April 24th. I do have a time, I could look it up, but it's not on my paper. The Evening of Excellence is on Thursday, April 24th. One change with that is there will be more of an open house beforehand. We're setting up a table for every senior to have basically kind of like you would at like a graduation party. Like a spot where they can put out all their trophies and their boards that some of them make. And everyone will also have a little notebook for people to write congratulations, thoughts for the future, anything like that, that we are providing for them to take with them at that event. And I think that's mostly everything from Rapid City Public School Foundation. And then next was the Title VI Parent Advisory Committee. First off, I want to say, I know that we can't have our meetings everywhere because of all of the like recording stuff, but it's so great that those meetings are in every different school, basically. So this one was at Knollwood. And we started with the new staff introductions. We have a new Lakota language teacher, so that's exciting, and the new Director of Positive Climate and Culture was there as well. Then the other major thing there was the OSU of Chetty Shakwi Essential Understandings are going under revisions at the state level. And so we received a presentation about all of those. I won't regurgitate that whole presentation, but it is, all the changes are available on the DOE website. If you search for OSU standards, you can check out those changes. There is a hearing in April, much like the social studies standards had, any other standards have. There will be public hearings as well as you can just go on and fill out a form to share your thoughts about any of the new standards, and the committees will receive those as well on that same SDDOE website. One big thing that group, and I would echo their thoughts, are pushing for with those is making them actual mandatory standards, not just standards. And so if I were, when I go to fill that out, that is what I will be saying, and I would encourage you to say something similar if you feel the same. Other than that, the other major thing from that meeting was they did have to have a parent that did have to step down from the board. And so they do have a special election on February 19th. As of that meeting on January 15th, it was not much of an election. There was one person in. So if anyone is interested, you can reach out to Ira Taken-Alive, our Title VI manager, and he'll get you hooked up with everything you need to be elected to that board if that is something that interests you. If, not you, but you, whoever's watching later on. And I think that sends most everything for that one. And the last thing I wanted to share is some positive things from the parent council. I love going to parent council because they're so nice to us. So I want to put these out into the world. One, the parent from Wilson shared how grateful she was about the IEP process. The parent from Rapid Valley and East shared how grateful she was for teachers, how much she loved the new principal, and how much she appreciated the semester break. This is just a selection, by the way. I won't read all of them. Ellsworth Air Force Base also noted that they appreciated the semester break, especially for military families. I had not really considered how much of a difference that might make for those families. Grandview said that there is great communication atmosphere going on at the school, and they love the symphony opportunity for fourth graders. And South Middle School shared, once again, as they often do, how much they love that new building. And that is all for my reports.
All right, thank you very much. Ms. Stephenson.
Thanks. I don't have much to add because Katie and I are on all three committees and Katie took care of it. Thank you. It kind of the intersection of facilities and leadership. I just wanted the board to know co-op is collecting a bunch of information, and we talked in leadership about setting a study session at the end of February where they can present that to us. So we feel like so that we know what they've learned from the community before the master plan is done, and they can also collect some feedback from us on that feedback that they collected. So I wanted everybody to know that that is on the schedule. And then to reiterate from the finance committee, what Mr. Sassy presented to us was a capital outlay, being more mindful about the budget, setting kind of some continuity and how much gets scheduled gets spent to budgeted for different purposes. And I wanted you all to know that the finance committee was solidly, that makes a lot of sense. And so I imagine that Mr. Sassy will be presenting that to us all as a whole at a meeting. Hopefully we have a nice robust discussion about that and can set up some long-term habits of our finance directors to keep our facilities in good shape. So that's all.
Mr. Berkeley, yeah.
I flipped my paper over and found more notes scribbled. A couple more things from Title VI that I wanted to share. South Middle School is hosting their first WACHIPI in March. So look out for that. They're having planning sessions now. It was also shared that we were approaching 2,800 of the 506 forms for Indian education. And that is significantly higher, which means a significantly higher budget, which is also always great. And then the last thing that I wanted to leave with was regarding the new Lakota language teacher at Knollwood. I wrote down this quote from another teacher. She wouldn't say it herself. But the other teacher said, "All the kids want a hug from Miss Temple." So I think that's really great that she's already making such an impact in just the time she's been there.
And I think along with those increased applications, Dr. Strasser helped me to make sure I clarified this, what I heard out in the streets, that might qualify 2 more schools to be title buildings.
Right. We're currently We currently have 2 additional schools that meet the requirement for free and reduced. That would be Blackhawk and Grandview, were the ones that met that standard. So Ms. Strong is, of course, working on the plans for all those things. But that's where we're at. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
And
just
that's,
quick
yeah.
clarification, there's 2 different kinds of forms that we're talking about, correct? Because you're talking about 504, but yes, he's talking about the ones that,
Okay,
yes,
not
and
the-
you're talking about the reduced lunch. So
my
just to
apologies.
clarify,
All right. That's why you
Nobody-
always get clarification.
yeah, so many forms.
Thank you. Anyone else? Where are we? Okay, legislative report.
Thank you, President Carr. It's my pleasure to virtually introduce you both to Mr. Sam and Mr. Larry Nelson.
Before we, start with that, does anybody need a break? Okay,
I do.
let's take a 2-minute.
Okay.
My apologies to, Mr. Baker, but let's take a 2-minute break
Sure.
and then we'll come back.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, everybody, think we're back, and so we'll get started.
Okay, very good, sir. Again, virtually introduce you all to Mr. Sam and Mr. Larry Nelson. Sam and Larry are with Freeburg, Nelson, and Ask LLP. They are, of course, representing the district in an agreement to provide lobbying services. They have been longtime lobbyists for Sioux Falls School District and are very, very experienced at this game and this process. I would just say very quickly before turning it over to them, they've been awesome. We used the analogy earlier today that we're really building the plane as we're flying it with this process. We don't know what we're doing. And Sam and Larry have been super patient, super helpful, super knowledgeable, and have helped us better understand where we need to be going with this. So they're going to provide an update. And then I'm sure we'll be happy to answer any questions or have any discussion the board has. So Sam, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Hey, thanks, Coy. Good evening, everyone. My dad, Larry, had to step away and take another call. And as I turned on my camera, I realized, I don't know if you can see it, but I kind of look like a vampire. So like, sorry for that. I don't normally look this way. It's just the lighting in the place where we stay up here in Pier. So,
Gotcha. Thanks, Sam.
yeah, wanted to just give you guys a quick update, sort of where we're at in the legislative process, and then some things that Coy and Corey and I and Dad have come up with as ways forward for you all. So we're tracking about 40 bills for the district, and that is everything from voucher bills to pretty technical statutory changes to state retirement, which will affect your educators and your staff and things like that. So all those are on your list. And just as a sort of a brief explainer, I guess, of how we do things for the board, we tend to be over-inclusive rather than under-inclusive. And so my dad and I, and then our paralegal Sarah, and a paralegal law student who works with us, we all get eyes on all of these bills and read them, and we add them to a tracker. And then Coy gets sent daily, sometimes every other day, but usually daily updates of where bills that we've added to your tracker are, and then what's happening with them. And then today we had sort of our first call with Dr. Strasser and I and Coy and my dad, where we discussed the bills. And we try to sort of filter out what I'll call the big bills, the controversial bills, or the important ones. And so we've got maybe 10 or 12 of those that we're watching. And then additionally, we've discussed through how are we able to take a position as a school district with input from the board, but then in times when there maybe isn't time for input from the board, how do we go about getting a position on a bill so that we can articulate it to the legislature if it's important enough? And so I expect to maybe in the next week or two have that process a little more fleshed out, and we'll be working with your board attorney, Kelsey Parker, to talk about how we do that in a way that doesn't violate open meetings laws, and then gets as much board input as possible. So that's what we've been working on, and I think it's been going pretty well. As Corey said, we are building the airplane in flight, but we've been able to discuss bills that are important in pretty much real time and go back to the legislature with where we think Rapid City is at. So with that, I want to just mention a couple bills for the board's consideration that I think are important to you and that I think are worthy of maybe the board taking a position on. The first are the two voucher bills, which I'm sure you've heard about, House Bills 1009 and 1020. These bills have both generated a lot of controversy and opposition from school boards, parents, teachers, pretty much everybody across the spectrum, to include an entity called Fair SD, which is a homeschool group that is represented by Rob Schonsberg and Jason Gloat, who are two lobbyists up in Pier I've worked with pretty extensively. And their group is wanting to be very sure that any voucher bill that is passed, or any whatever name they want to put on what I refer to as voucher bills, doesn't lead to what they would view as government interference or oversight or involvement in homeschool curriculum, etc. And so it's made for very interesting partnerships between that group and what I'll call the traditional education lobby. House Bill 1009 is up tomorrow morning in House Education. It faces a strong group of opposition. I don't want to say the numbers publicly, but I've done a nose count, as have some of the other education lobbyists and leadership in the House of Representatives, and I think there's a decent chance that bill will be defeated tomorrow in House Education. If by chance it's not defeated and it makes it to the House floor, I would anticipate at some point they will ask for a fiscal note. For those of you not familiar what a fiscal note is, the Legislative Research Council, in addition to attorneys, has folks that are versed in economics and finance and budgetary matters. And so the LRC staff, the Legislative Research Council's staff, will put together an estimated fiscal impact on the state budget. Some really rough numbers I've heard thrown around are potentially $71 million, which, if you've been paying attention to the state budget process and revenue projections, we don't have $78 million or $71 million, excuse me. So expect discussion on the merits of the bill, oversight for state money, and then where we're going to come up with the money tomorrow. And then 1020, I would imagine, will make its way through the process in the coming weeks. I don't know when the bill will be heard. It's been had its first reading and it'll be referred to committee, but I don't know when it will be heard. Two other bills that I think are important in addition to vouchers are 1017 and 1048, and these are bills that require cash for certain transactions. There are some folks who feel that they should be able to pay cash at school events or at other places, and so expect that to be a topic of debate with the legislature as we move forward. Some other bills that are important to you, I think 1035 is a bill that's going to appropriate around $10 million for school security enhancement grants. I think this is a good bill. It currently includes, as I read the bill, it currently includes public and private schools. And so we just need to watch this and see how the money will be allocated and what it can be used for. But it's always a good idea to secure your school. 1039 is a bill that repeals programs that reimburse teachers or counselors for earning national board certifications. And I would obviously leave the discussion on how you want to approach these bills and support or oppose them to the board, but I would recommend that bill and House Bill 1040, which is going to reduce the state share of contribution to subsidizing dual credit. I would recommend that the board oppose those bills. It is always advantageous for our students when the state can chip in to help high performers get a little further down the road towards whatever their post-secondary endeavors might be. And so those bills are ones that I think the board should discuss, think about, and come up with a position on the House side. On the Senate side, we've got Senate Bill 55, which is the Dibert-Venheisen proposal to replace the special ed levy and the general levy with state dollars, and then reduce property taxes. There are a couple other property tax bills that are floating around there that would also potentially cap growth at around 3%. And you may recall, I believe it was Senate Bill 167 from last year that was going to actually take us back a few years and cap valuation at a year. I'm going to get the year wrong, but it was like 2019 or 2020 or something. So those bills are out there, and obviously that will affect, the district's income and budget. There's a bill out there to modify the maximum sparsity benefit, Senate Bill 70. And then there is another one related, 71, compulsory school attendance. And then lastly, Senate Bill 74, which is going to require the publication and review of open meetings laws. We've had some counties and some other local government entities that have usually accidentally run afoul of open meetings laws. And so one of the fixes for that is to, at the beginning of the year, have everybody kind of do a refresher of the open meetings laws. So that's the overview of what I consider the bigger bills to be. Dr. Strasser and Coy are getting updates from the large school group as well, and then the mid-sized schools. And so they have some other bills that are of interest, but those are what I see as the main bills of import to the district. And if and when the district is ready, I'd love to get a position from you on oppose, support, or stay neutral, and then I will do my best to make those things happen. That is all that I have for you folks at this time. I'd be happy to answer any questions on anything that you have on your mind.
Christine, is your hand up?
Mhm.
Ms. Stevenson.
Thanks for the overview. So I know you also lobby for Sioux Falls. Do they take votes as a board for support, neutral, oppose? How's the process work with the Sioux Falls district?
That's a great question, and candidly, I have a sort of a 70% understanding. Ideally, what happens is they will have a staff member that sort of their staff role aligns with the area of the bill. For example, Todd Veek, anything to do with the formula or money, levies, teacher compensation. Todd's the money guy, so Todd's kind of the lead guy there. Dr. Knowles will, take bills that are more policy oriented. They'll divide those up and they'll come up with a sort of a draft or recommended position. And Coy, feel free to jump in here because I know you've talked extensively with Todd about how they make this happen. They're pretty efficient with it. They will come up with a draft position, and if they get so many board members who can kind of say, yeah, I like that, or yeah, I don't, they'll put it out as the officially unofficial position. And then I believe what happens is eventually the board members vote on those positions, and they are updated on the Sioux Falls School District's website with their legislative positions, so all legislators can see them. There have been times where, it's just the nature of the business. A bill is substantially amended to do something the board likes or doesn't like or whatnot. And in those cases, Dr. Stavum and I will typically discuss the bill's up in a half hour. Where are we at? We'll try to loop in the board president, and we're able to oppose them. And I always make sure I explain that. And legislators are, the good ones are pretty understanding that, like, hey, it's Tuesday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We can't have a board meeting. This is the best I can give you. And then typically, I can't think of a specific bill, Christine, but there have been times where we've sort of had that evolution happen. And then the board has, for lack of a better term, kind of ratified what we articulated to legislators, either in committee or in person. Does that answer your question?
It does. So it sounds like, if we asked our administrators to put together position statements by our February 4th board meeting, and we could just give an up or down vote on yes or amended or whatever, is that too late of a time frame?
No, I don't think so. And I think it's always good to have the board buy in. And this is something, I don't want to get too far out in front of my skis, but I think it's a fair thing to telegraph, to discuss. What I would like to do in consultation with Kelsey, and Coy and Dr. Strasser and anybody else that wants to talk about it, if there is some kind of motion or board action that would allow those two to, in the absence of board guidance, come up with a position that can be later affirmed or changed by the board, I think that may give us the flexibility we need. I'm going to be very cautious of not getting out in front of things on too far on a limb. But so the short answer to your question, what you had just explained, I think would be very good, because now we've got a board vetted bill or position that we've taken. And if something comes up, we've got people that the board has authorized to take a position they believe is in the best interest of the board.
Okay, thanks.
Ms. Clapping.
Just a quick comment because it's related, if you don't mind, ma'am. Thank you. Yeah, so I think Sam summarized that really well in all my discussions with Mr. Veek in Sioux Falls. That is essentially exactly the process they have where the role for developing positions and ultimately pushing that out to the board is of primarily superintendent and business person. And the challenge here, and we've talked a lot about this with Sam over the last couple of days, is there's a really erratic nature to how those bills are dropping and being amended and moving through that process. And so it just doesn't allow at times for us to be able to look out on the horizon and get the board together and have a good conversation. And so ultimately, I think it's kind of a two-part process where, you know, when we can, we're bringing that all to the board up front, well-developed, articulated positions that you can discuss and support or oppose or whatever. And then in the circumstances that we can't do that because of the way that the process is working and the trying to be nimble and move quickly and efficiently, that we would ultimately come backwards. And so, for example, at the next meeting, go, hey, we had this conversation about this bill. In the board can, again, as Sam said, ratify or modify that opinion however you need to, or whatever the case may be. So I think a lot of it is just being able to be nimble and agile and keep Sam and Larry informed and moving in the direction we want them to, so that we're getting our return on investment. Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah, I just had a really quick question on, so, you know, we get emails from the Legislative Action Network from ASBSD and it'll give us the links to like the committee meetings. Is it, since we have you guys, is it beneficial for us to log on or speak, or is it better for us not to because we already have like the one voice? I want to do what's best and most efficient. And if more voices are better, great and available, like I'll be up at that time, so it'll be 6:45 here. But if it's not, I just like some guidance as to what you think for us as individual board members would be best.
Sure. Well, I think in certain cases, all of the above. And you are not, I don't think at the end of the day, anyone can stop Jamie Clapham from showing up on Zoom if because they do allow remote testimony and saying, hey, listen, I'm here on my own behalf and this is what I think about this bill, on any bill. And so you are allowed to do that. Our board could designate a person to testify remotely or in person on behalf of the board. We may need to get you a lobbyist badge for that, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's just fine. There are often times where there's been a few times Dr. Stavum has testified in person, and I can't recall specifically, but I feel like we had Todd speak to the legislature on behalf of the district because he's the business officer, and so he just knows, it's better to have Todd explain it than to have Sam Nelson try to explain it because, I took college algebra more than once. So that type of thing can happen. I do think there are times where it is powerful and useful, on a Tuesday or Wednesday morning when the education committee meets at 7:45, you're taking time out of your day to say, this is something that's really important to our district. And you can be the designated speaker, or a lot of people come in and this is sort of a art, I will say, hey, I'm Sam Nelson. I'm city attorney for 5 city, and I'm making this up, by the way, but I'm city attorney for 5 cities in the eastern part of the state. But I'm here speaking on my own behalf, and I think this bill is bad because, that happens, and you've probably seen people do that. I think that's okay. I think it's always generally a good idea to socialize doing that before you do it. But short answer is there are times it's definitely beneficial to have a board member speak on an issue in addition to or instead of your lobbyist. Part of what you have us to do is to tell you what's going on and who we can talk to in preparation for committee hearings. But it is important sometimes for people to hear from the actual decision makers of the Rapid City area schools, and that's you folks.
Hey, any other comments, questions? Mrs. Stephenson?
Is your sense that 1020 has more support in the education committee than 1009?
Maybe a little, yes. It kind of depends on who you ask. 1020 is the House Majority Leader's bill that was, my understanding, it was drafted in conjunction with Dr. Graves and the Department of Ed. Nobody was let in on that, and I'd been respectfully asking to see Dr. Graves's draft or to speak with him for quite some time. Kept telling me it wasn't ready, and then Leader Odenbach said they'd been working on it for months. So I think 1020 is probably slightly favored among the proponents. But I would say it's looking better than anticipated in the House to get rid of both of them. And I think it's a Yankton Press and Dakotan poll something like 80% of now I'm trying to find it. Of course, I don't have it, so don't quote me on this number, but something like 80% of people they polled disfavor vouchers in any form.
Mr. Nelson,
Yes, sir.
can you be patient with me and review the House bills and the Senate bills that you just stated we should be most paying attention to?
Certainly. And that poll was 81% are opposed to vouchers. Yes. And Bishop Carr, I'd be happy to put this in an email as well for you all so you have them. But the most important bills, I'll start with House bills. 1009, that's a voucher bill. 1017 requires the acceptance of cash payments for admission to a school event.
For brevity of time, you can just list them to me and then
Okay.
in more detail. I mean, I'm gonna make a motion, so I want to make sure that
Gotcha.
the motion has these accurate things.
Okay, 1020, 1035, 1039, 1040, 1048. Those are all the House bills. And then the Senate bills are 55, 67, 70, 71, and 74.
Okay, thank you. All right, board members, any other questions for Mr. Nelson? I don't know if we, I'm sorry, I apologize for the lateness of the hour. I see that it's 9 o'clock where you are. Do you have time to stay while we make this motion and go through this process, or do you need to go?
Certainly, no, I'd be happy to make time, and we worked this late during this time anyway, so.
Okay, all right, I'd like to make a motion to designate the acting superintendent, the business manager, and our in-house counsel to create legislative positions on House Bill 1009, 1017, 1020, 35, 39, 40, 48, and Senate Bills 55, 67, 70, 71, and 74 to bring before the board for our ultimate approval. I will entertain, and I probably prefer entertaining putting a date on this motion. Yes, ma'am.
Can you say, and any other bills that are dropped between now and February 4th? Any other relevant bills?
Okay, we can add that. So add that and any other at the end of Senate Bill 74 and any other relevant bills to the school district, to the Rapid City area schools, any other relevant.
The property tax bill might be relevant.
Okay, school district. I'll entertain. No.
Don't sleep.
That might not work.
Sam, when's the deadline for introducing new bills?
That's a good question. If I could, Bishop Carr, I would recommend that we sort of keep it rolling. Let me just say this and then we'll figure out how to articulate it into a motion. You will have bills that are introduced for a couple of weeks from now until the final deadline, which I don't have in front of me, but it's in February. And so what typically happens with my process is I will send lists of bills to Dr. Strasser and then Coy. And so I'll say, here's the bills we're tracking for you. Here are new bills. And so by Friday of this week, your list is 40 bills long now. It's going to be 40 or 50 or maybe 55. And so I guess what I would recommend your motion be is develop legislative positions on any bills they deem of import to Rapid City area schools and present those positions to the board as soon as possible. And that way we have a rolling, here's these new bills, here's our recommended position. And if you have 30 bills or 50 bills or whatever the number is next meeting, you guys can adopt or say no to the recommendations. Does that make sense, or have I thoroughly confused you?
No, that makes total sense to me. My only concern was that the second largest school district hasn't said anything about any bills. And so I wanted to get out at least an initial statement on, I guess, these bills, or if the 1009 and 1017, if those are the most important. I just want to get some type of a statement out as soon as we can. Well, reasonably as soon as we can.
Okay.
So I did just on the calendar on the legislature website, it says last day for introduction of individual bills and resolutions is February 5th.
I think they'll create this position statements on an ongoing basis and share those with us, and we can vote at our regular meetings as those statements get updated and more bills get dropped. So I don't know that we even have to put a deadline.
Okay.
Yes, so just to add on to that, so one of the things that we're working on is a bill tracking document similar to other districts, similar to what you see on ASBSD website, SASD website. And so I think, we'll move that information quickly and get it out to you as soon as possible. It's, as you said, Christine, a living document, because as bills are dropping and morphing and changing, we'll need to update it and move, but we'll get it out for your review ASAP. I think then having it, approved or discussion at the next regular would be great. And then we'll just continue to make adjustments and as new bills come or amended bills come back or whatever the case may be, we'll continue to inform the board and gather feedback from that point. But
okay,
I think your motion achieves what you want it to achieve.
Okay, I'll amend my motion to the following. I move we designate our acting superintendent, business manager, in-house counsel to create legislative positions on House and Senate bills for board approval.
Yeah.
So that makes any House bill, Senate bill at any time, and we will approve or disapprove whatever the position you all suggest. We will then make formal approvals as they come to us. Okay, I need a second to that motion.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of designating those three people, that motion I just all read, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Okay. So that we just adopted our
Okay,
process.
very good.
So,
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Sam. Anything else you'd like to add, Sam, before we let you go, sir?
Yes, briefly, up to you folks tonight, but 1009 is being heard tomorrow. If you are opposed to it, or whatnot, I guess if we had a motion and it's just, do we legislatively oppose 1009? If you guys do that by majority vote, I can articulate that to legislators and committee members tomorrow. If it's not something we're prepared to do this evening, that's fine. I think there are enough people that are lined up to oppose it. But that's sort of the biggest alligator closest to the boat at this time.
All right, I will make a motion, another motion parodying what Mr. Nelson said. Can I get a second?
Second.
Definitely.
Really, everyone?
And,
Everyone.
and, and for clarity, the motion is to move that we oppose 1009,
Yes, HB 1009.
House Bill 1009. Okay, just roll call, just.
Okay. Troy,
Yes.
Jamie,
Yes.
Christine,
Yes.
Troy,
Yes.
Jamie,
Yes.
Christine,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Walt,
Yes.
Katie.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
All right, there you go, Mr. Nelson. Who says we can't work fast?
Thank you all so much. We're building that airplane. I'll be available if you need anything
Thank you
else.
very much.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
All right, thank you.
Sam.
Good night. All right. So that basically, we answered, as we know, we made an addition to the agenda. Oh, do we? You got something else?
I mean, if it's appropriate, there is a school lunch bill and they are asking for boards to sign on. And I'd like to make a motion that we support the school lunch coalition bill. It will provide state funding to cover the cost of reduced price
Oh, I did
lunches
see that.
for all school districts in the state. It has a very small budget impact, but could have an enormous impact on many families in our district. And I think it'd be powerful if we signed on as a board to support that bill.
Okay, I'll second. Any discussion?
Hayden Whitman,
Kate Whitman is sponsoring it.
Hayden,
Kaden Whitman.
So just very brief comment. So we've been heavily involved with the Student Lunch Coalition over the past couple of years. A lot of the bill, frankly, was built around our district's unique issues and needs and our feedback to that group. But board publicly supported the bill last year. The bill brought forward this year is very similar. I think that was a really good brief description. I would recommend the board support the bill. It's a great bill. It has a very minimal impact on the state. And I don't think there's any negative aspects to supporting the bill at this point.
Is there a number, Christine?
There is, it is sorry. I had this pulled up and I was ready and then my computer
Just so that our
crashed.
motion can include
Yeah.
that, the bill number.
the letter doesn't have the number.
Oh,
Hold on one second, guys. I have it here. Sorry. Okay, it is. So she's got it in the email as HB 209. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, since that's the best information we have at this time, we can go with that, since that's in the email that talks about.
Yes, sir.
Maybe we could be.
So
Yes.
she has the PDF listed as HB 209 draft. But then when I actually pull up the bill, it's not numbered. It just says
The
House
have a
Bill.
name, title.
An act to provide for reduced price meals at schools to qualifying students.
So let's approve that motion to support
Sure.
that title that you just gave. So whatever
Yes.
the number is, we're supporting that.
Can you
title.
send that to me, Mr.
I
Sassy?
sure will.
Okay, Christine has made a motion. I have seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving what Mr. Sassy just said,
Yep.
signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. All right, so for the record, Mr. Strasser, Mr. Sassy, and Kelsey, the board has actively supported, made motions to support two bills. Oppose one bill, House Bill 1009, and officially oppose 1009 and support the second. All right, so if you will, we'll say that to document that, and we've started running. So I guess at that case, then we're not having resolutions. We motion our opposition and our support. Correct. All right.
Mr. Sassy, do those just go in the minutes? Do you need anything other than that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, and I'll have you help me wordsmith those. Okay, thank you.
All right.
President Carver.
Yes.
I personally would still like to see a resolution come forth because I feel like that also shares some of our why. Especially regarding the vouchers. I don't need that for all 20 of them or whatever, but I personally would still like to see and would like us to discuss the possibility of a resolution, which I'd be happy to help Jamie, right? Just because of that why, like now they know that we support that, that's great for now, but maybe in our February 4th meeting, we could still have a resolution.
All right. I'm not against that. And again, obviously resolutions can come in all directions. So we don't necessarily have to entertain a resolution from administration. We can create our own. So that would be fine. I think if you had it out to us, obviously before February 4th, then we could have read it and made corrections before, so that during that meeting, we can just up or down it. And in fact, I'll put it on the agenda somewhere. If we have enough foreknowledge of it, I can put it under the consent agenda. Okay. All right. Any questions? Everybody understanding what Mr. Berkland is requesting? Okay. Thank you very much. Now we're on to other. Okay. Ms. Stephenson, Ms. Clapham, Ms. Urban.
I just have a very brief other, thank you to the Wilson PTA for the very sweet notes written by students and the cookies. What a nice treat to celebrate School Board Recognition Month or Appreciation Month. It's nice to be recognized and I appreciate it.
Okay, Clapham.
Yes, also very quick, I just want to say great job to the West bands. I really enjoyed the concert the other night. They were all really, really good and just a really good turnout. And also just a reminder, check the website, Facebook for those co-op meetings for the community. We really, really want your input. I know many of us are sharing it on our social media, like, please, please, please come. We really want your input, so. That's
All right, Ms. Urban, thank you, Ms. Urban.
I was just gonna say what Christine said. I really appreciate the thought from Wilson. I needed some brownies tonight because this is a long meeting, so I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I want to thank, as everyone knows, I have a goal to go to all 23 kitchens. And in going to Black Hawk, they had their student council meet me. It took me aback. It's the first time that I had been greeted that way, but they greeted me. They did a wonderful job, took me to the kitchen, talked to me about what they liked and didn't like. And so that was amazing. Thank you to the staff and the students at Black Hawk Elementary. All right, any other? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to go into executive session 1-25-2.3.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded, I gotta put this down. Who moved it? Mr. Berkland. and
Ms.
Ms.
Stevenson.
Stephenson. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. All right, we are officially now in executive session. There will be no votes or decisions made at